Well, how about a round of applause for Jeremiah? Hello.
Thank you.
So our friends at California Closets made this happen. We love them so much. And I know that you want to say something.
Yeah, I'm not going to get emotional because we just met, and I don't want to ruin this, and he would yell at me if he was here. But Edward Lehman, who's up here, is hands down one of the most important people that I've ever met. It started off as a professional relationship, and it really grew into something more. He really stood for integrity and standing for something in brands, expressing more than just selling, but participating in people's lives. And I love the entire California Closets family. That's what they are. And I'm really grateful that I get to hopefully carry on his messaging, which was so beautiful and so impactful. So I miss him a lot.
Yeah, he was the chief branding officer. He was a lovely, lovely soul, and he is so sorely missed. And I know that he meant a lot to you.
Yeah. He was so amazing and just naughty enough. Yeah. And also like incredibly existential. We'd be talking about shelves and somehow we'd end up in a world I hadn't imagined. So
very cute. All right, well, we have a lot, if you want to really get to know him, we have a lot to talk about. It's true, the mics are kind of loud, right?
Yeah,
I know, I feel...
That's okay. I just hate the sound. You know, you listen to your voice
I know.
like an answering machine. You're like, who's she?
I know, exactly.
Yeah,
I know. I'm pulling it away a little bit. All right, so we have... Oh, by the way... So we have sort of these like chapters, and we'll talk about them, and then move all around because who cares? But this was so cute because your folks. This is an old portrait of you, and the
very old.
Brittany is here. Is the photographer here? Oh, she's not here. Oh, she was going to come.
Well, she's dead to me now.
Yeah, she's totally dead. Dead to you now.
No, she's actually a photographer. When I started my career, she was one of the few that would shoot me for what I had to pay. And our careers have kind of grown over the last decade plus together. It's pretty.
That's
long.
so nice.
Yeah.
That's really, really nice. All right, well, Brittany, there you go. You got a little action. You send her a picture and make her feel really guilty. Okay. All right, there we go. All right, so, we're going to talk about, he has a podcast, season 3 podcast, and we'll talk about some of the players. But one that was very touching was the one that was with your mom and Polly. I love that one. Yeah. And she was so lovely. So let's talk about your mom. Jojo, Gogo? Or
When?
But do you call her?
No, Jijo.
Jijo.
Yes,
Jijo.
because she refuses to be called grandmother.
Oh.
I don't know why. No, it was a really interesting full circle moment. I mean, I for those of you who don't know, I have a 9-year-old daughter and a 6-year-old son, and it's definitely an experience that I never in a million years thought that I was going to have. And when I was doing the podcast, which I love, I would come home and I would talk about it with our daughter, and Poppy was like, "Why don't you have me on the podcast?" I was like, what are you going to talk about? She goes, well, I know about home. I live in a home. And my mother happened to be in town, and it just was this idea to have 3 generations talking about what it means to be home and what tethers you to those spaces. It was really emotional. My mother is hard as nails, but also has the biggest heart. She sobbed through the whole thing, basically. I felt bad.
You couldn't tell that. You actually couldn't tell that.
Really?
Not really.
Oh, good.
But you could tell that you were crying when Poppy said that home is a place you can rely on.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was beautiful.
Yeah, because it wasn't for me growing up, and it wasn't from my mother. She was a single mom for the first half of my life. She worked 3 jobs my entire childhood, and she did everything she could to give us the best she could. Not to get out of topic, but this year we bought a farm in Portugal. And
we're going to talk about that later.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, it's a very full circle moment to be able to sit there with her, who's finally at peace. Listening to her granddaughter talk about home. I don't know, it was a really beautiful moment.
I wanted to ask you this, Jeremiah, because the podcast is all about tapping into why home is important or how it matters or what it has given you. And I guess my question to you is why, not what is, because you'll get there, I'm sure, you'll tell us, but why does that mean so much to you? Because you're making people think about that. But what about you growing up? I have a tendency to think that when you're missing something, that longing is the thing that holds you to want to know why everybody else is feeling like that.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we grew up, with not a lot of money, and on the weekends, our big exercise was, either going to Target and looking at everything we couldn't afford, or going to model homes and walking through. And one of my first memories young was walking through those spaces and fantasizing about the lives that I would create for people. Like imagining that there's a mother that comes down for coffee and she would sit in the window seat and I would move this over there and I would change this. And so the fantasy for home for me has always been about the moments people have in it. It's actually what I think has been the guiding light for my career because I still design that way. But I always would fantasize about the lives people could lead in their home. And it's, I had no idea at the time that it would lead to a career, that it was even a possibility. But when I look back, I've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah, this is something I say to young people who are so obsessively online. Is my experience was I was like you in that way. We would do tag sales, and I didn't know that. I guess maybe I didn't know they were cool until it was a certain point in my life where you can be creative. Yeah. It's not that you don't have the money, Anyway, but I lived through the magazines.
Well, so did I.
Right. And so that's the thing that young people kind of who aren't, although there's waves back to it.
Yeah.
That it's like I remember Vincent Wolf in his bikinis diving into the pool in Montauk. I have very strong memories of other people and how they live.
Yeah, I have every old vintage design magazine I can find still. I mean, for a kid growing up with no money, that's how you traveled. You sat on the aisle and looked through every magazine and dreamt up things and saw places. I mean, the great news now is you can do it digitally, obviously. On Instagram, you can travel, 10,000 miles away in 2 seconds and you can see things. But there's nothing
not the
to
same.
me like holding a book and the smell of a magazine.
Right.
It's still my favorite.
It's amazing. I know, me too.
It's an old-fashioned gal that way.
So you were, it's funny because when you did the podcast with Rachel Zoe, sometimes you have a memory about something and then it's so much later that you're like, didn't he? I always thought I saw you first on Rachel Zoe a million years ago and then it was true.
It was back before my husband sucked the life out of me. No, I was a baby. I was, early 20s. I came in to work for her, and it was hands down one of the most challenging experience for a lot of reasons, but really insightful and amazing. And she was the only person that looked at me and told me that I was doing the wrong thing and that I should go into design. She's like, you don't care about the dresses, you care about the furniture, it's what you love. And she goes, and if I can give you one piece of advice, if you can work through your passion, then the rest will figure itself out. And I did. I left that month, and then I sold everything I had and I got my LLC and a decal for my wall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Full circle moment. You find out much later that the home you go back to in California was one she lived in, right? That's crazy.
This was so fucked up. So listen, we lived in New York, my husband and I, and then he had this real desire to move to LA, and I was like, ugh, I've already been there. But we decided to move back, and he sent me a listing for a house, and I was looking through the listing, and I was like, this is Rachel Zoe's old house. I decorated this house. I don't think I can live there. I feel like my tears are still in the carpet there. And I was like, I'll walk through the space with you and just decide if it holds too many echoes for me. And ironically, I got super emotional when I walked up to the door. It was, almost a decade later, I was coming back with a husband, a design firm, a daughter who was a little over a year, and the fact that this was the life that now I could step into, it was very wild. You have those moments in your life where you just feel like you're on the right path and the right synchronicity, and that was one of them.
Yeah, I was wondering if you felt that versus not that.
Yeah, I did. And I didn't feel anything from the past there negative. It was the opposite. It was actually ended up being one of my favorite homes that we lived in. It was incredibly warm. We hardly did anything to it aesthetically. But it was a great chapter for our family.
That's so beautiful. Only because were having this talk, and actually you made me think about things for myself, is that we had a place in the Hamptons. I was looking for a place with a lap pool because I like to swim. So there were only 2 places. And so we walk through this one house, and I feel memories in the house, and I don't know why. And I was like, it looked like it was modern, but it had been modern from 15 years ago. And so it was a little tired, and that's why it wasn't selling, and blah, 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 blah. But I leave the house with my husband, and I text an architect friend of mine, Robin Osler, very talented. And I write, Robin, did you happen to design this house that had like an industrial, big pivot doors, and it had like a way about it that felt like her? It also had cement board siding, which wasn't very Hamptonsy, but I thought it was amazing.
Love it.
So I send her the note, and then I look at my husband like, oh, I write it back. When I first became editor, did I publish this house?
No way. How
And it was,
funny.
yes. And then we ended up having that house for quite a few years. We recently sold it. Anyway, but
Yeah, there's those moments.
I
that are really
know.
wild. That was one that I did not expect. But it ended up being really beautiful and a very full circle moment.
yeah, I love that.
And I texted Rachel right away. I was like, you are never
You're
going
not going to believe this one,
I am
sister.
moving into your closet, bitch. I'm going to fill it up, too. Ding dong.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was wild. It
Yeah.
was a blast, though. It was a beautiful chapter. It was one of my favorites. We were like a young family in that house.
Yeah. And we saw pieces of it too, because you shared it, which was also so much fun.
Yeah.
Especially seeing your kids grow old. So when they're saying they're 9 or 10, you're like, what? Right?
So mortifying. The conversations I was saying have definitely shifted in my house with a 9-year-old. But yeah, I think, we did the show on HGTV mostly because, we wanted people to see a family like ours and to understand a family like ours. Obviously it's a design show and we show love through design, but the intention of it was to kind of go into people's living rooms where you can learn so much in the safety of your living room, and for them to see the way we lived and the way we loved and the way we cared for each other, and how universally we're all just striving for the same thing. And it was a beautiful, beautiful chapter doing the show.
Yeah, it was. I want to talk to you a little bit about that.
Going
These
out
are
of
just-
order, sorry.
No, that's okay. No, I just wanted to show you, this is when you first started your design firm. Was this?
No, this was more recently. I wish
I
this was
thought
when I
these-
started.
Oh, because I was like,
Yeah.
that was really good.
Thank you. Yeah, I was a prodigy.
Wow.
No, the first photos from when I started were like silver-leafed fireplaces.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Different budgets back then. Yeah.
Okay, so here we go to the TV. It's funny because I have some friends who are, doing TV shows, and you now too. And it's almost like, I think it's sort of like you get like a couple years and then they like have to revamp the show or rename the show. And so it's been a few different names.
Yes.
And I think the latest was Nate and Jeremiah, the Home Project, right? Was the latest one?
Nate and Jeremiah Home Project, formerly known as Nate and Jeremiah
Jeremiah by
Design,
Des-
formerly
Oh,
known
no.
as...
There was another
changed-
one.
Yes,
Yeah, there was
everybody
another one.
loves to change a name.
I know. It's
But the
crazy.
show, theoretically, it really just stayed the same for 7 years. We did the show.
Yeah.
And it was really fun. I mean, for those of you who work with a spouse, I take my hat off to you. Ironically, we work really, really well together. I mean, he's the best person in the world, and we obviously had our moments, but it was really fun to do together. And, I look back, and it kind of serves now as this really beautiful timeline for our family and the growth and our children. It was really beautiful.
Yeah. I found it interesting. So I'm a girl from Long Island, and you're out there in like the Rockaways and Forest Hills, and you're in some of these neighborhoods that are so like, not all of them, but so like, you landed on the moon on that street, and you were so kind and showed such humanity to these folks and their struggles and what they were going through. And I'm sure some of the husbands are like, what the fuck is going
100%.
on? Yeah.
I mean, listen, the truth is, this, we can get into this because I have Queer Eye and then I shot, that is my favorite part of design, is the human connection component.
Yeah.
And the understanding that we're all one, mistake, one circumstance away from being in a situation where we need someone's help. And the beauty of what that show represented was, at its core, what design should be about, which is that connective tissue and how much a space can really elevate your life and can move you through grief or pain or trauma or growth,
Yeah.
and I don't know, that's my favorite part. I mean, it's hands down what I love about design the most.
I think, don't you guys think, if you watch the shows, I've watched them all. I mean, I'm a design junkie first, then I'm an editor after. But like, I think that's what makes you so stand apart.
Well, that's awful.
No.
That I'm nice?
No, that you have humanity for people and that
Oh.
you're not afraid to be emotional.
Oh, yeah.
You're not afraid to like be who you are. And I think because you respect that, other people respect you for that.
Well, for anybody who, had to come out, which I hate that term. It's more like letting people in. I was a great liar for 20 years of my life. I was really
Wow.
good at being who I needed to be at any moment for anyone, as long as it wasn't who I was. So the beauty of letting people in and leaning into who I really am, falling in love with somebody who loved me for who I am, is that I got to be that person, the good and the bad. And yeah, I am very emotional. I love to cry. I love to connect. I think it's what we're here to do. So I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah. Do you think that once you let people in, so to speak, is that when more of that became like part of who you are, like showing who you really are?
I just really believe you can't ask somebody for something that you're not willing to give. And it's the same for my design firm. It's the same for the show. You're asking people to open up and share some of the most vulnerable parts of their lives.
Yeah.
These memories, these things that they've survived, what they're going through. And the only thing that I can offer them at that moment is all of me as well. That for me, I think is what, like I said, it's been the guiding light for my firm, with who we work with the show, and I think it's what I strive to kind of shift with our business as well. Is redefining what how we look at beauty, and changing the beauty of experiences and how that influences design. Obviously, we love a sofa, but I don't know. The story always comes first for me.
Yeah, yeah. I did notice on the show that sometimes you and Jeremiah would not have the same opinion, but I noticed you won a lot.
Yes. Well, yes. Nate.
Not really, Nate. Not really.
Yeah. It's never dull marrying a decorator. But I think the beautiful thing about Nate is that when we met, I was, a baby. I had just started my design firm. I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. He had been on Oprah and had been doing this for, 15 years. But he never looked at me like anything other than a peer. He always believed in my perspective, my intuition with design. And there was always just this beautiful level of respect with both of us. So, yes, we fight all the time with design, and usually the most beautiful stuff lies in the middle of that argument anyway. But yes, there's never a dull moment in our house.
Yeah.
We were arguing this morning about a console.
By the way, it is a big deal. I mean, if you think about it, that, Nate was, he's super talented, and he was definitely famous when you met.
Yeah.
And what you just said was like so lovely, that he's been supporting you, like support who you are. He saw who you were.
Yeah.
And it's never been like
no, it's not. In all fairness, I'm also a bulldog. And when we met, I was like, you're not going to buy a flight for me. I don't want your opinion about my LLC. Don't tell me how to bill. And I figured it all out. And we laugh about it all the time. I was like, I literally sat down and just made shit up, trying to figure out a way to craft a business. And he gave me the freedom to do that. And I think his belief in me and his respect for me obviously helped embolden that passion and take the risk.
One thing in the show, like if you watch any of those 3 seasons or the later seasons at least, they like ask people to get rid of stuff. You're really funny.
Oh man, I can't get rid of anything.
Right. He can't get rid of anything. You are like do you want that piece? Like,
Oh yeah, I try to be nice about it. I don't want to be a complete monster and be like, that is the ugliest piece of shit I've ever seen. And the truth is, it's theirs, and it's got a story, and there's something that connects them to it. And I get that. But usually, and the reason we started doing that was because you learn so much about where they're at and
Right.
what they're holding on to through that process. It's never really about the stuff.
Right.
It's about some memory
Right.
that's kind of tethering them. So it actually ended up being this really beautiful exercise for us to get to know people.
Right.
Which in TV is very hard to do. You know, people are very aware now about trade outs. They love that word. And, you know, good television is only good if it's real and vulnerable and honest. And so that's what that did for us.
Yeah. And I mean, but I like Nate. I guess I'm a little bit more like Nate in just in terms of you're pretty funny because you're so emotional, so about the stories, yet you're willing to get rid of the stuff.
Yeah,
so that's
Nate likes to check something off. I'm like sitting down in a corner crying with somebody. He's like, okay, we got to get onto the foyer. What are we doing next? You know, he's very matter of fact.
Right, but I mean, but then he wants to save everything.
Yes, I know. He's a hoarder.
Right, he's a hoarder. I'm a design hoarder too, and I love design hoarders.
You should have seen his house when we met. I mean, I'm just going to let you in on something. There were on one table, and I've said this before, there were actual like llama figurines, like a herd. I was like, what the fuck are these? He's like, well, they're from, I don't know where they're from. I was like, but why?
Yeah,
like,
dusty too, by the way.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he emotionally
we don't have them
holds,
anymore.
Right, I imagine. They're gone. Yeah, they're gone. But it's funny that he's the one who emotionally holds on to the things. You hold on to the memory of things.
Yes, he holds on to things.
Right.
And I hold on to places and spaces.
Yeah.
That mean a lot. You know, leaving our house with this kitchen island that we used to dance around, I'll miss that.
Right.
You know, he stresses out about the daybed that we lost in the sale.
Yeah, I'm an auction person too, so I totally get it. Nate, I'm with you on that. Let's talk about Queer Eye. Hello, congratulations. He's going to be the new designer. Well, you taped a season.
We did. We're done. It's coming out soon.
When soon?
Like in the next couple of months.
Oh.
Very soon. I can't say anything because Kelsey's ears just perked up. But it's very soon. And I had the best time of my life doing this show.
Who's your favorite? Was it Tan? You're friends with Tan, right?
I was friends with Tan and Ant before we started, but what was really beautiful about the show, and I just want to say this is not a PR twist, they are just as good as you think they are. They care, they show up, and for me it was so bizarre because I've never had a real queer community around me. You know, my husband and I have a pretty small life with the same group of friends. I've got 5 girlfriends that I've had for 20 years. And they were the first like real queer community that I had around me. And I reclaimed so many parts of myself that I had either put away as you grow up and as you raise a family and you start a business and you compartmentalize things. I reclaimed so much of myself through them. And the show, I think I'll spend my entire life trying to describe what it was. The show is so real, which is not always the case with our show before.
Right.
This show, you watch these people walk into an entire different version of themselves and move through things, and to sit back and watch my friends participate in that and watch them do it through what they love and how they show love. It was just remarkable. I mean, the whole season I sat around looking at them and going, is this how it always is? Is this what it's like?
What did they say?
They're like, yeah. And they were also really grateful because they've been doing it for so long that I thought that they were like, it's so nice to be reminded through you what we're here doing.
Right.
And we had the best time. I was really proud of the design, and I love them. I'm seeing them next week.
That's amazing. I was wondering, because obviously they're trying to do a lot of things in one show, right? It's the fashion, it's the emotional, it's the whatever, or the food. And you still have to design
oh my God, it was
big project.
So gnarly. I have 3 days to do the entire house or the spaces. And of course, because I was the new kid, I was like, I am going to get marble in this episode. They've never had a natural stone. I was desperate. And what I really wanted to do this season, you know, I think I go against, we can get into this too, because there's an interesting dichotomy between TV decorators and the interior design industry.
Okay.
And what I really wanted to do was articulate the people's stories through to design. I did not want it to be 10 episodes of the same house in different ways.
Right.
And so every episode is completely different stylistically because the people are different. There was every type of design style you can think of happens, and it was really, really fun. It was so hard.
Doing it so fast, right? So tell us I was wondering about product placement. I was wondering around timeline,
Yeah.
and how many people are helping you get
Well,
how many rooms?
The good news is Netflix is not interested in product placement. They're like, here's your money, go. They typically there's at least 3 rooms because I obviously was like a bleeding heart. Like anything that people shared, I was like, we got to do that room too, because she talked about it. I had a team of 4 people besides myself, and it really is what it looks like. We meet our hero that as soon as we're done filming, my team comes in and cleans out the entire house. I worked around the clock with my design firm, a couple people from my firm, to solidify designs and concepts and everything so that, I'm as existential as I am and emotional. I'm also a psychopath with organization and details.
Good.
And so, I made sure that we were teed up but it was hands down the most intense process I've ever gone through.
Wait, so how long is you have to get everything that is available or almost available? What's the time period?
Well, you kind of get 2 days before you meet the hero. I kind of sent through like a design questionnaire that was kind of obscure, but just enough where I could kind of extrapolate enough of what their aesthetic is so I could kind of build the groundwork. And then after I meet them, I would dig in and we would just go. And it was a lot. There isn't a Home Goods that I haven't been 25 miles within Vegas border. There's not a store that I didn't try to find. I mean, every time I was done shooting, I'd be designing. But I loved every second of it.
Wait, so how long did it take?
72 hours each time.
Oh, wow. The reason why I was asked for product placement is because I remember seeing a show. One of the last shows before you was they had Smeg. They had 2 Smeg. I was like, did Smeg give that?
There's certain brands that I think contribute things,
right.
but there's no commitment, which is fascinating.
Yeah, that's good, right?
But it's just, I don't know. I hope everybody enjoys it. We had a really, really good time.
It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so you, too. Like, you were perfect for that show.
Thank you.
My God.
I was so stressed out starting it. I was like, what is going on? I am not loud enough for this group.
So
turns out I'm very gay and shocked at how gay I am on the show. So I really amped it up.
And
I know. I was like, get ready, babe.
And what is a very stressed Jeremiah like? What does that look like?
Just quiet.
Oh, you get quiet.
I get quiet and focused. On installs, if I'm stressed, I put on a headset, and I usually come before anybody's there to be alone in the space. I'm not like a yeller or a screamer.
Yeah, no,
it takes a lot to get me there.
That. Yeah.
I usually just go inside myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. We can't wait. Actually, we can't wait.
All right.
So this is so we have a bunch of images of projects in the more recent years, but I do think it was great. We were having a conversation, and he was talking about this idea of like TV design versus like professional designer.
Yeah.
So, and you have the perspective. So tell us what is that like?
Well, from my point of view, it's an interesting juxtaposition because TV designers think that interior designers are stuck-up assholes, and interior designers that I know think that TV designers are hacks. So it's just really wild, like the difference between the two. And I think what's been really beautiful, and I think what I've seen and been able to do with the show is I kind of get to bounce between the two worlds. And I think the happy places, I think both are equally talented for different reasons. But it's a really interesting perspective, how misaligned they are. And I think I think it makes sense because a lot of design television is very prescriptive with what they create and how they create it. There are a lot of limitations, time, budget, all of that comes into place. But it's got its own set of hurdles. But it's been really interesting, and especially when I was building out my design firm,
right?
With which we have multi-million-dollar projects. Finding a balance between the two has always been really tricky. But somehow we've figured it out so far.
things have changed too.
Yeah,
Let's face it.
100%.
Like
Design has
there,
been largely democratized in a really beautiful way, which is great.
yeah,
And I think the conversation's changing, which I'm glad it is.
yeah. And I would say like the early design days were pretty rough for designers to watch if they even watched a show, right? I mean, it's different now.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm friends with Leanne Ford. She's fantastic.
Yeah,
she
she's
loves,
great.
she loves design. Well, she was in fashion, so it's a little.
She was like super edgy for that network,
right.
though.
Exactly. Yeah, she was like, I'm not. Yeah,
Yeah,
she's
but
not
she was,
into.
she's super talented.
Yeah. And so tell us how many people, just lay out the firm, how many people work for you and like how many projects are you handling?
Well, there's about 30 people between both coasts. I have an office in New York and an office in LA. I would say we probably have about 20 plus projects right now from coast to coast and a couple internationally. I joke that when I started the design firm, I wanted just one long table where we were all at, and we would just be this creative studio where we put all of our ideas in, and we argued, and we found beauty in the conflict. And I'll never forget, I hired a director of operations, and the first week she was like, "We got to get rid of this table. She's not here.
Table's got to go.
Didn't even come today. She doesn't have time." She's like, everybody needs a table. And so the company has obviously grown and scaled over the course of the last 10 years, but the intentionality of what I wanted has not changed. I think it's a really happy environment with people that I really love and respect. It's the best surprise of starting my own business. And I think a lot of times the driving force behind keeping it going is how much I love the people I work with and how I get to create with them. I love hearing people disagree with me. I think it's so fascinating. I don't know, it's just this really beautiful surprise. It was my favorite part of owning a business. Insurance, not so much, but the employee part is great.
Or do you ever, dream about, I was just thinking about Dan there, who was starting out with residential, but every residential designer wants to do hospitality. Have you thought about that?
Yeah, we've dabbled in hospitality. I absolutely love it. I think there's a little bit more freedom with what you can express. Our firm it's for me, the first phase of our process is always kind of crafting a soul for the home. It's this exercise that we've kind of figured out and we go through. And I think even with hospitality, you kind of get the freedom to do that and be a little bit edgier and bring materials in. But yeah, I love hospitality, but I also love residential. I mean, we've got really good clients. We've been really lucky.
And you're so attuned to them.
I try to
just the
be.
way you are.
Yeah, I really try to be.
Yeah.
I know what it means to spend $10 on a pillow or $300 on a pillow. And I understand the value, the intention that needs to be behind it, the quality that they need to understand and they need to feel. At the end of the day, I'm in the service industry. It's it's really interesting to go from being a TV show. And then like last week I had a client being like, "Can you climb that ladder and hold 3 samples to the right?" And I was just like sweating profusely. And I was like, what else? But that's what it is.
That's
They're
what it
to make
is,
people
kids.
happy, and I love that.
There was something we'll talk about the podcast with Christian Siriano that was so cute, where he was like, "I dressed Lady Gaga and it's harder to forget a regular person to pick out a sofa."
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
No, and that regular person will give you a run for your money.
Totally. So I do want to talk a little bit about your family. It's so interesting because I didn't know this, that when you think of Jeremiah, you think that, wow, this guy was meant to be a father. Like, you were totally meant to be a father. And you were like, but I never wanted to be a father. So
No, I never wanted kids. I had a really complicated childhood, and I was like, I'm good. I don't want to bring any of that into anything else. And to be honest with you, I never thought that I was going to find a great love. I never thought I was going to get married. I never thought any of that was really possible. And then
why do you think it wasn't possible?
Listen, for the queer community, there is not a lot of representation that is multifaceted. Let's put it that way. I had never seen a family with, a gay family with children. Will and Grace at the time was what I grew up with, and I was like, I like this show a lot, maybe a little too much. There wasn't a lot of representation, and so I don't think I even knew it was possible. I definitely didn't think that I was going to find a great love, and then when I met Nate, I couldn't imagine not having a family together. It was something that we talked about, I think, on our first date. And it was the first time that I thought to myself, I could do this with him. I could create a family with this person. And it was the best decision we ever made.
Yeah, time has changed so much. We have Dawn and Stephen here from DIFA, and you're just reminding me of Bill Sofield, an amazing designer, a great friend. And I was inducting him into our Hall of Fame, which is like our Oscars. And he brought 100 people to the event. It's dinner and it's expensive tables. He bought like 10 or 12 tables. And he went on stage and he said, I mean, I don't know how many years this was, like it was 15 years ago. And he said, you know, I'll never be able to marry. And so this is my wedding.
Oh, this is heartbreaking.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. I still think about that.
I mean, we got married the year gay marriage was legalized. I mean, it hasn't been that long.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I think the best experience that has come out of 10 years of doing our design show was we were in Nordstrom's at the Grove, because when we lived in LA, that's the only thing to do is go to the Grove with a child. We were in Nordstrom's and this woman walked up to us and she was like, I'm so sorry to bother you. My son came out to me this weekend and I was devastated. And I was like, oh, okay. Where are we going? Because I was so devastated and, you know, I was so sad about what his life was going to be. And I'm like, what is happening? Yeah. And then she said, but that night we sat down and your show came on and I saw you with your family and I looked at him and I realized that he could still have the big future that I wanted for him, the family that we talked about that he wanted. And so for me, that is like the beauty of representation of the show, you know, and it was my favorite thing to come out of everything we did. So I hope that it mattered.
Yeah, no, it's true.
Yeah.
No, it's
Thank
true.
you.
It's true.
Thanks.
I mean, it doesn't hurt that like you're both so good looking and so lovely on TV, but that's good. I mean, it's good for them to see that.
I look a little bit like a troll if you look close. So. But Nate doesn't age, so that's really fun for me.
Okay, so let's talk about, you've done 3 seasons of this podcast that everyone's loving and listening to with our good friends at California Closets. Thank you so much. Yay. And yeah, amazing. And did you tape season 3 yet? Or
right now.
Oh, you're doing it right now? Oh, you're doing it right now. Ah.
We've got some really good guests.
Are we taping this for the podcast?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, there we go.
Oh,
there
yeah,
we go.
there's some.
Yeah, so season 1, season 2, season 3.
I just did Karamo. We just did Kelly Rowland, who's a dear friend of mine and so fun. Rachel Zoe, which is
she was
really cool full circle moment. Joanna Gaines, which for somebody who's like, you know, coined the market on shiplap, she's super.
Oh my God.
Which, by the way, is a full-on trigger for me now.
Yeah.
I'm like, you do not want farmhouse, ma'am. This is not the architecture.
It's over.
Anyway, but she was so interesting and she was so. I mean, I know her personally, but she opened up and she's so layered and so fun. And
yeah, she talked about her family and going back to...
And her history. And
her history.
And it's been...
That was a longer show, by the way. That was longer. Yeah.
It's been really amazing. I mean, like I said, like with the show, home holds so much more than furniture. You know, it's where all of it happens.
Right.
And just like through the exercise of connection and talking about, you know, where the memory started and where they're at now, it's just fascinating. You
dig it. You like digging in. You love digging in.
The more uncomfortable, the better.
Yeah, you're like, ooh, and what about, you know, they say something, I'm like, oh, he's going to ask why. I know he's going to ask why.
Kind of hope so. That's what people want to know, right?
Yeah, totally.
I'm always fascinated by people's journey and their perspective on home, you know, and why it means so much to them. I
really enjoyed Christian Siriano, who we know.
Yeah, she's fun. I say she.
Yeah, I see. Yeah. I got it. No, but the thing about her is that there was a different kind of maturity.
Yeah.
And because we've seen Christian like win Project Runway, and I didn't realize that he had just got out of college, and it was very nice that he was saying, you know, people thought that I was arrogant. He goes, I didn't know anything. I didn't know about the show. I just went on, and he clearly is so talented that he could handle it. But I loved the way he is now. Like, I mean, I loved like thinking of him then, and then how, like, I don't know, there was
Yeah, I mean, a lot of us have grown up with him. I mean,
Yeah,
in a lot of ways. And I think what's endearing about Christian is that he is who he is all the time. There's
Yeah.
no versions. There's no, he is open and honest. And he does so much and has such a big career. And the fact that he's inspired by interiors as well. And he's,
Yeah.
now he's got a firm. I think it was fascinating. And I loved hearing about, and I know this just from my limited time in fashion, but the difference between clients in fashion and the difference between clients in home, and they're much more complicated.
Yeah, he was so funny because he was saying, like, you have an assistant, I have an assistant, but like when that client calls at like 2 a.m. because they're worrying about the like fabric choices, you got to answer them.
Yeah.
But then you are cute because you're like a kinder, sort of gentler manner about you. And you're like, but what do you do if, you can't get them, if you can't get them here? And he's just like, I cut him off. Like, that's it. Like, he is so like,
I'm not good
that's
at
it.
that.
I
I'm
know,
like,
I
we're going to
know.
make this work. I'm going to hold on to you forever. I've had to fire 2 clients in my entire career, which was hands down the most terrible experience of my life. And I held on so long. I was like, you're going to love me. I'm going to figure this out. But no, I get it.
Yeah.
It is not the easiest relationship at times. But I think when it's great, it's amazing.
Yeah. And again, the podcast with his mom and Poppy was really beautiful. And there was something I learned from that about your relationship. So we see how you interact, how Nate and you interact, and this kind of nice play between you and how you banter. But she said, I get so mad when they come, it was Oscar and Nate, they come into the house and they're happy and silly and too happy, and she's grumpy and she wants to be moody. And I was like, I would have never expected that, because he seems more matter of fact, like you said, like with work and stuff.
Not.
Yeah.
He is goofy dad. He is silly dad. I am boundaries and, not strict, but consistent. And he's fun. He is Peter Pan. He is the youngest spirit after everything he's been through.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Everything he's survived. He's so much joy, and it's so easy to be happy with him, and I think, one thing I want to say about California Closets in particular, because I think a lot of people see a partnership and a relationship and they're like, oh, somebody's cashing out. That is not my relationship with anybody that I work with, especially with California Closets. When I was growing up, I told you my mom worked 3 jobs.
Yeah.
She, I'll never forget, in high school, she finally got us into, because we were in a really terrible neighborhood, she got us into the nicest neighborhood in Modesto, California, the worst house in the best neighborhood, and worked so hard. And she had California Closets come out and do her closet in our house. And it was nothing special. It was, white and basic and simple, but I'll never forget walking in and seeing her crying. And I was like, what's wrong? What happened? And she was like, I've always wanted something made for me, by me. And so working with them now, it's always, there's always a connective tissue. And I love what they represent, and I've loved working with them. And even the podcast, we don't talk about closets, it's a testament to Edward.
Yeah.
About how it was all about how these places and these spaces really mean something to you, and you don't forget these things and these places in between. So, I love doing it.
It's lovely. One other guest I shout out because I love her, Wendy Goodman.
She's my favorite.
Yeah, she's amazing. She's amazing. We've known each other for a long time and are kind of fans of each other. But she talks about, it was so beautiful. Like, she talks about her apartment that was like a rental that she had forever, and it was, as you imagine, as eclectic and old. And she had her boyfriend, her broke up. She found an apartment. She's been in it forever, and then she had to leave. I don't know how many years was she there?
She was there for over 20 years.
20 years, and I actually remember seeing the article in New York Magazine about the heartbreak of like like there were a few things left in her, like peeling. It was all the history of the things that every editor, like the friends that you make and the things that you get and the prototypes and the blah, blah, like it was so beautiful.
It was the end of an era,
Right.
a big era. There a lot
Exactly.
happened in that part. Ironically, the people that bought it reached out to my firm to do it, and I was like, I can't do it. I can't do
Wow.
it. First of all, Whitney will beat the shit out of me. Second, I couldn't
Can't
bring
do
myself to
it.
do it. Yeah,
Can't do it.
no. There's a great space.
Yeah.
And I think what's cool about the podcast in particular is it really is this tapestry, not only of experiences, but of design styles and aesthetics and different approaches to home and the way people love them or don't love them. I mean, I did a recent one with Karamo, and it's fascinating to hear what home means to him. So
Yeah.
I can't wait for you to hear it.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Shout out to her. So let's talk. This is the last piece. Is the book,
Yeah.
which came out last year, right?
Yes.
End of last
No,
year.
this year.
Oh yeah, this year. Oh,
God,
was
it
it
feels
this
like
year?
4 years ago.
Oh my god! Oh my
It's
god!
been a long year.
Wow!
Yeah.
Wow! And there's a lot. There's a lot in this book. I mean, you really know how to be yourself and to write these stories that make people feel close to you, and you don't seem to have a problem with that at all, which
Well,
is very rare.
Well, thank you, because it was the hardest thing I've ever done. I wanted to create a book. I think the first thing I ever wrote was that this isn't going to be a beautiful design book. There's so many out there. I wanted this to be about something deeper. I wanted to really learn, because we've moved 11 times in 10 years. And I'm like, what is wrong with us? And I always fantasize about being one of those families that there's actually a movie coming out where it's like they follow their entire life in this one room. And I'm like, that's my fantasy. Like to look back and be like, you remember when that happened when the kids were young? And that's not who we are. So the book,
Poppy said, I have to say that Poppy said, because you were talking about your mother, and you were saying, she moved like 15 times. And Poppy goes, we moved a lot too, Dad.
Yeah.
And you were like,
that's when I took her mic away.
Yeah. It was so funny. Okay, sorry.
Yeah,
go
she
ahead.
keeps me in check constantly. So the book was really this exploration of people I've met, people I love, and understanding why they never left their home. And I talk about it in the end of the book, but ironically, the entire book is about beauty. Beauty of intention, the beauty of ceremony, the beauty of memory. And that's when I say it really changed the way I design, because it brought me back to how I began my design journey. And it actually culminated at the end, because it took me 2 years to write it. And it culminated in the end with Nate and I bought a farmhouse in Portugal, which sounds very glamorous, but it is a fucking ruin. But I love it so much. And I gave my mother a house on the farm, and I told her, I'm going to renovate it for you. You decide what you want. And she lives there now. And it's like our family's legacy is this place. Our daughter always talks about how she wants to get married there. We go every year. And it's I would never have seen that property the way I see it now had I not written the book.
Yeah. You have Portuguese roots, though, right?
Yes, I have Portuguese. I had a very mean Portuguese grandma and grandpa who I loved a lot.
My art director, her hubby is Portuguese, and he's
knows.
a really good artist, and
Yeah.
he does a lot of like shows in Portugal. She has to go over there.
It's my favorite place. If you haven't been, I highly suggest it. It's very popular right now, but it's so spectacular, and the people are so amazing.
Yeah, you tell these beautiful. Well, I think you're showing me this because Oprah's the one that kind of convinced you to do the book, right?
Well, we were sitting. Sounds so lame saying out loud, which I know. But we were sitting having lunch, and she was like, you should really write a book. And I was like, yeah, I want to write a book, but she's like, well, what do you want to write about? And I was like, I honestly, all I care about is like the spaces that keep people. And she said, that's your book. That's what you should write. And I listened, because you do. And I thought what was really fascinating when she said, photograph the house. I could have shot it really beautifully and shown the inside, which is magnificent. But the only thing she talked about when I interviewed her were the trees and the land. That she did not, it was not about what was inside. That was not what kept her. It's not what she found beauty. It's not what she saw as luxury. It was the trees and having all those trees around. So it was fascinating to see what people connected to.
She also talked about the thing that kind of touched me too was she talked about the first time that she had like a designer work on the house. There was this different perspective about what should Oprah Winfrey have in her house.
Looked like a museum.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And
exactly.
she was like, I wasn't in the house. And
Right.
she says it took her a long time to figure out who she was through design.
Right.
But I
Rose
think a lot,
Barlow then helped her.
yeah,
Yeah. Right.
which it's amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
obviously. But she, like a lot of people, I think you want to project something sometimes,
Right.
And that doesn't really feed you in the end.
Right. There was something heartbreaking too about like there was a fire. Did she lost the trees?
an
or?
oak tree. Yeah, she
Oh,
called it
yeah.
the Apostles, and it's this area. We photographed it in the book, but she said it changed the entire imagery. She has another tree growing there now, but it's definitely different. But that's all she cares about.
Yeah. Well, I think we can all say that this was like very special for this group, that you were here today, that you got off of work early to come. I want to thank you, Jeremiah, for everything you're doing and for being such a beautiful representation of a person, humanity, talent, fatherhood.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank
yeah.
you guys so much for coming and listening to me, Amaran. I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Big round of applause. And Jeremiah's team and California Closets, we love you.